Hello everybody, it is I, Brian the Pirate, and in today's video, I want to talk about an item, a consumable in the game that I think is having a slightly more negative impact than we first initially realized. What I want to talk about is these bad boys. That's right, identification scrolls. Now initially, you probably saw the thumbnail or me pointing at the identification scrolls and thought, yeah, they're a bit annoying. What about them? And I'll come to that in a moment. First, I think we need to address what is the point of an identification scroll in games such as Path of Exile and Path of Exile 2. Now, we've had this explained by developers before, but we've also had it explained specifically by Jonathan Rogers of Path of Exile 2. The entire point of identification scrolls is when an item drops on the ground as unidentified, you initially see the base, and it's a base that you potentially want. So if it is one that you want, you go, ooh, that is a base that I want. You pick up the item, it's in your inventory. You then go to identify it either via an NPC or via an identification scroll. And then you get this second pull at the machine. And at the time of identifying it, there's this moment of, does it have the affixes I want? Granted, vast majority of the time, the answer is no. Every now and then it's a yes. So you get this double whammy of the base initially dropping. You go, yes, that's a base that I want. And then you identify it and you go, ooh, they're the affixes I want. That's the point. Now, of course, there's the thematic side of things where you are some meathead barbarian or huntress or whatever character class you're playing in whatever game. And of course, you don't know how to appraise an item, so you glean the knowledge from a magic scroll or the magic man in your hub of whatever the game is, and they will tell you that, aha, it turns out this is tier 3 potato, and that is exactly what you were looking for, and so on and so forth. Yes, for the most part, in modern action RPGs, it's the pulling on the slot machine. Now, I would argue, nowadays, that's a little bit tedious. It's not quite as fulfilling, as dopamine-inducing as it once was, and that's mostly because of how much loot we can get showered upon us at any one time. And as a result of that, what we have then done is gone to loot filters to restrict how much loot is showing on the screen. And then depending on the game that you're playing, depends on how you configure your loot filter and the behavior that instills in you and how you interact with items that you see on the ground. Now that leads me to what I have come to realize, at least about myself, and to be clear, I'm not speaking on behalf of all of you. I'm about to explain a behavior that I've noticed that I do because of items being unidentified in Path of Exile 2 in comparison to them being dropped as identified in Last Epoch. And it may well be that you hear this and you go, no, I can't relate. I'm a gaming god. I get all the base types that I want ever, blah, 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 and so on and so forth. But let me explain. In Last Epoch, when an item drops on the ground, it is dropped identified. You can see what affixes it has. You can see the name in full, which means when we configure our loot filters in Last Epoch, we're not configuring them to just an eye level or a base type. It's usually a base type, maybe several base types, and then the affixes. Therefore, if the item shows up on the ground to us and is visible in the first place, that is the first pull on the machine. The piñata has already popped. There is an item we want because it is showing to us. Granted, in Last Epoch, there are, especially with the new update in Season 2, there are ways where you can get affixes that may not be as strong as you initially want, and then you can make them stronger because there's more deterministic crafting in Last Epoch, which is why I think Last Epoch's crafting is actually the best in any action RPG, might I add. But because the bases are identified, it means we pick up more of them and we're more prepared to craft with them. It also means that sometimes we'll go for a suboptimal but viable base type. Maybe you want specifically a Chris that has multiplier damage on it in the implicit, but you find an obsidian dagger instead and you're prepared to go with that because it actually has the affixes you want and therefore works as a temporary upgrade that you can build on until you do find the specific base type you want, you know, min-maxing. Whereas in Path of Exile 2 and to an extent Path of Exile 1, the items drop as unidentified, which means we configure our loot filters a little bit differently. We tend to stick to specific bases and specific eye levels, which generally leads to this behavior of, if it is not optimal we're probably not going to bother with it. And I wonder how many of you have a blue item drop on the ground that could potentially have the 2 affixes that you want as a base to start crafting on, but you ignore it. Do you even show blue items on your loot filter anymore? Now, granted, there are other issues with Path of Exile 2's crafting, namely the lack of deterministic options or mechanics, which means that if you don't have enough currency to begin with, you're probably very unlikely to even want to craft on a base that you actually have and wanted, never mind something that's suboptimal. But I do wonder how our behavior would change if items in Path of Exile 2 would drop identified and we start seeing blues that are not quite the spear that we wanted, but it is a spear and it has a tier 3 or tier 4 affix on it instead of a, when I say tier 3, tier 4, I'm going like tier 1 is best. It's a thing. Basically, it doesn't quite have the best affixes on it, but it's good enough. Maybe that can work as a temporary upgrade rather than just having it removed from our loot filter altogether. And that's just a small thought that I wanted to get out there. One, identifying things is tedious. You're going through the inventory and you're just spamming them anyway, or you're clicking on an NPC to identify all the items. The pull on the handle isn't as good as it once was. So is it really needed anymore when it's just tedious? Probably not. So that's one reason. But 2, as I said, I think it could change our behavior and how we approach picking up bases. I think we would pick up far more bases, which when crafting is improved upon and more mechanics are added to it, we are more inclined to actually utilize those bases in the first place, as opposed to just hoarding wealth and then buying the items instead. What do you folks think about identification scores? Do you think they're tedious and annoying? Do you think they impact how you interact with your loot filter, with how you craft, with how you potentially just run past and ignore bases that could have the potential to be your next upgrade? Or are you a gaming god with the perfectly customized loot filter and you pick up every damn base that could be possibly viable and I'm full of shit? Let me know in the comments below. If you're new here, by the way, you should probably hit the subscribe button, ding the bell, like the video because it helps a lot with the algorithm gods. And also, I stream on Twitch. I'm currently streaming the first Berserker Kazan, which is like a Souls-like, you know. I'm stabbing people with a spear. It's quite a lot of fun, actually. It's quite tough as well. That's enough from me. I want to thank you all very much for watching, and farewell. I'll remember you.